I'm Nima Rajan. Canada's food price report estimates it's going to cost more to buy groceries for the average family of four next year. It says that would amount to more than $14,700, which is up 7% from this year. Researchers say pandemic-related supply chain disruptions, labor market issues, and severe weather are all driving up grocery bills. The report predicts dairy prices will rise 6 to 8%. Bakery and vegetables will increase 5 to 7%, and fruit prices will jump 3 to 5%. The Chinese embassy has responded to Ottawa's decision to join a diplomatic boycott of the Beijing Olympics. And it said Canada is in no position to criticize China's human rights record. It says Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's claims of human rights violations by the Chinese government are false. And it says Canada is not qualified to be a, quote, human rights preacher because it has committed heinous crimes against Indigenous people. All right, well, meanwhile, Canada has emerged from a major peacekeeping summit in South Korea on Wednesday. This is where it pledged tens of millions of dollars to the UN, but without any mention of troops. Canada previously promised a 200-soldier force or new commitments to troops and equipment. Richard Gowan, an expert on the UN and the International Crisis Group in New York, says Canada's silence has dashed hopes of a major return to peacekeeping. He says Canada can't lecture other countries on the need to protect civilians. Federal Immigration Minister Sean Fraser says the government predicts it could take 2 years to bring 40,000 Afghan refugees to Canada as promised. The minister says the government is facing challenges in Afghanistan and other countries where refugees have fled. But he told reporters that hundreds of Afghan refugees are arriving in Canada weekly. The NDP has criticized the red tape imposed on desperate Afghans. A former Canadian Space Agency engineer has a court date next week. He faces a charge of breach of trust. This is for allegedly using his position to act on behalf of a Chinese aerospace company. Federal authorities arrested 61-year-old Montreal area resident Wanping Sheng on Tuesday. They allege he used his status as a CSA engineer to negotiate agreements. This for the installation of satellite station facilities in Iceland between July 2018 and May 2019. The federal privacy watchdog is warning Canadians about the growing threat of surveillance capitalism, which is the use of personal information by large corporations. In his annual report tabled today, Privacy Commissioner Daniel Therian says personal data has emerged as a highly valuable asset. And he said no one has leveraged it better than the tech giants behind web searches and social media accounts. He is encouraging the government to improve planned legislation on private sector data handling practices. BC's Ministry of Health says a report on rising complaints of seniors abuse shows more needs to be done to improve reporting methods and public awareness. The Office of the Seniors Advocate released the study on Wednesday. It found reports to health authorities of abuse, neglect, and self-neglect rose 49% in the past 3 to 5 years. The Seniors Advocate is calling for a centralized phone line and awareness campaign to be established province-wide. Sasktel has launched a new mobile phone company called Lum, which will serve as its low-cost cell service provider. The provincial government already operates a cell phone company called Sasktel Mobility. Don Morgan, the minister in charge of Crown-owned Sasktel, says the move aims to give consumers a lower-cost choice. Car thefts are on the rise across Canada, especially in the Toronto area. Brian Gast of Equité Association, which investigates auto thefts and insurance crime, says about 80,000 vehicles were stolen last year. And he puts some of the blame for the 1% rise on the short supply of new cars. Owners are encouraged to make things more difficult for thieves by using steering wheel locks, data port locks, and parking your car in the garage or a well-lit driveway. A multi-party committee probing expanding Quebec's law on end-of-life care is recommending anyone diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease should be able to request or sign an advanced request for medically assisted death. The current law, adopted in 2014, set out strict criteria that include informed consent of a patient until their death, which shuts out Alzheimer's patients. PEI potato farmers were protesting an export ban on their potatoes in Ottawa on Wednesday. Island Farm representatives handed out PEI potatoes in front of Parliament Hill in an effort to raise awareness about the ban. Ottawa said 2 weeks ago it would suspend all shipments of fresh potatoes from the island to the U.S. This was after the discovery of potato wart fungus at some farms. Stay tuned. We'll be right back after the break. A lot of market activity around initial public offerings has been evident this year in what is being called a record year for IPOs. On Monday, Reuters reported the Nasdaq is set to eclipse its rival, the New York Stock Exchange, in initial public offerings this year. This comes as companies have raised record levels of capital through new stock flotations in the U.S. Well, joining us now to tell us more about what is behind this growing trend in new stock offerings is Brendan Caldwell, Director of Caldwell Securities Limited. Brendan, welcome back to Forum Daily.
Glad to be here, Nima.
So what is driving this growth in new public offerings this year, Brendan?
A really strong stock market. Companies that are either private are becoming public, or companies that are already publicly owned raising additional capital, either for takeovers or other acquisitions, or just because they can. If the stock market's willing to pay you many multiples to your earnings or even to your sales, and it makes sense to the company to raise new capital at that rate, well, then if people are willing to give you the money, that's the best time to take it.
And I've also heard the term new issue being floated around in this space. So what exactly is a new issue, Brendan?
Well, a new issue of stock. So most stock that people buy when they think of the stock market is on the market itself. You're buying from somebody else who's a shareholder. You become a shareholder. You sell your stock. They become a shareholder, whoever you sell it to. But when a company issues stock from its treasury, from its store of capital, it has the effect of potentially diluting the number of shares because it increases the number of shares that are out there. So if you are a company that has 9 million shares outstanding and you issue 1 million from your treasury, there's now 10 million. And so your earnings and revenue is spread over a bigger pool. But if that million share issue can be done at a really high price, it might mean that the money that the company gets in makes it more robust and able to do certain things like acquisitions.
All right, Brendan, and why are new issues important to individual investors?
Well, it's particularly when it's a brand new company that's just being offered to the market, you have the opportunity to really get in on the ground floor, at least from a public market perspective. I can talk a little bit more about private and public perhaps another day. But the chance to get into a company that you've always wanted to own, but it's only been privately held to this point, whether it was Apple from 40 years ago or Facebook from a decade ago, or some of the new issues that have happened this year, it gives you a chance to get on the ground floor. An existing company, when they issue stock, it's a chance to buy it at a bit of a discount. Normally, these new issues are done at a bit of a discount to the market price, maybe 5-6%. So you've always liked a stock. This is a chance to get in at a bit of a discount to what you would have paid the day before.
All right, Brendan. Well, I'm seeing a lot of similarities between new issues and initial public offerings. So what are the key differences between an IPO and new issues?
All right. Well, a new issue can be any stock, either existing company or a new company. So an IPO or initial public offering is a subset of that. So a company that was private then becomes public, was owned by a coterie of founders and venture capital firms, private equity firms, and then goes out to public ownership. That's an IPO. And they cause a lot of excitement because often the up-and-coming new technologies are the subject of IPOs. They've been private for a long time, as some developer and his company has built this software that everybody likes and everybody wants to use, and now the general public can have a chance to buy into it. So IPOs, particularly in a strong market like this one, do create a lot of excitement.
All right, Brendan, just about a minute left here, but what is your outlook for the markets when it comes to IPOs and new issues coming into the new year?
Well, I think as long as interest rates remain low, and that's the really determining factor, I think the market for new issues will continue to be strong. So whatever happens with coronavirus or this or that, those are temporary blips. Interest rates really are the determining factor. And my hope is that there are more public companies out there, because the more people can buy into the best and most interesting ideas in a market or an economy, then I think having a greater public participation in markets will both help make people wealthier, but add to a greater public participation in the economy. And I think that's a good thing for creating wealth for a broad group of the public.
All right, Brendan Caldwell, always great having you on Forum Daily. Thank you again for your time today.
Thank you, Nima.
All right, stay with us. We'll be back after the break with a look at a new group being formed in the Senate, aiming to represent Black voices in the upper chamber. We'll have an interview from Senator Wanda Thomas Bernard up next. She's a founding member of the African Canadian Senate Group. Stay with us. Seven senators have announced the launch of the African Canadian Senate Group. Its aim is to ensure Black voices are heard in the upper chamber. The multi-group coalition is made up of members of both the Independent Senators Group and the Progressive Senate Group. The group says it is devoted to fighting racism and discrimination and engaging with Canadians while advocating for their priorities. One of the members, Senator Mobina Jaffer, says it's important for African Canadian senators to have a space in an institution that hasn't always considered the unique needs and lived experiences of Black people in Canada. Well, joining us now to tell us more about the recently formed coalition is Senator Wanda Thomas Bernard, a founding member of the African Canadian Senate Group. Senator Bernard, thank you for your time today.
Thank you for the opportunity.
So let's start with why the African Canadian Senate Group is needed in Canada, particularly at this time.
We recognize, and we have recognized for some time, that we are stronger together. And when we bring our voices together, we are, in that collective sense, able to more adequately reflect, represent, address the needs of people of African descent across this country.
I want to go back to an interview with the chair of the African Canadian Senate Group, Senator Moody. She mentioned that the voices, contributions, and priorities of African Canadians have largely been ignored by our democratic institutions. So that's a really big quote there, ma'am. Can you tell us a little bit more about what she meant by this?
The reality is we've always been underrepresented. People of African descent are underrepresented in most of our institutions in this country, and our democratic institutions are no different. And so, again, by coming together, we are able to bring forth a strong coalition of our voices that will ensure that our needs, our interests, our issues, our concerns become forethoughts, become active and high on the agenda, and not afterthoughts. We've been afterthoughts for far too long. And many before us have fought for this full integration of our voices, but this is the first time that we've had this number of African descended senators sitting in the Senate at the same time. So working together, it's a wonderful opportunity. And we hope that it's a model that we can model for the rest of the country in terms of what collective work and responsibility really looks like in this space.
So how is the African Canadian Senate Group going to address these issues to ensure that the voices of all Black Canadians are heard?
One of the things that we will do in a more rigorous way is actually to do consultations with people of the African Canadian community from one end of the country to another. So engaging with people, inviting input from African Canadians from all provinces and the territories so that we are addressing their concerns and issues as they happen. So that's one of the things that we will do. One of the other things that we intend to do is actually to bring more voices into the Senate. So as witnesses, for example, on committees, when committees are doing a study of bills or study of particular issues, we want to make sure that those witness lists include experts in different fields of practice of people of African descent, and again, representing our geographic diversity as well.
All right, Senator. Please go ahead.
One of the other things that we will do is when we raise questions, and issues during question period or on debates, when we're addressing bills and discussing many of these issues, we want to make sure that we raise issues that are of significance to people of African descent, that we address issues of anti-Black racism when we see them, when we hear them. When we're addressing bills, we want to make sure that they're inclusive, that our voices are always included.
All right, Senator Bernard, just about 45 seconds left here, but what are some of the top concerns among the Black Canadian population right now?
As we talk about building back better following the pandemic, of course, one of the things that we want to make sure that we don't leave people of African descent outside of the equations when we're talking about building back better, when we're talking about issues of employment and employability, when we're talking about issues of health and healthcare and access to health, when we're talking about issues of justice, and justice delayed is justice denied. So we want to make sure that in all of these ways that we're rebuilding from the pandemic, that we want to make sure that the needs of African people are central to those discussions as we go forward.
We'll be right back. The World Health Organization is worried that rich countries spooked by the Omicron variant could start hoarding COVID-19 vaccines. Its expert panel on vaccination is again urging governments to stop the widespread use of boosters. This so that they can send doses to low-income countries where people still haven't had their first shots. But the WHO says everyone should follow the policies of their governments, noting that declining a booster shot won't free that dose up to get shipped to another country. The director of the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says African governments might have to resort to COVID-19 vaccine mandates. This if their citizens don't hurry to get the increasingly available doses. The warning by John Nkegasong to reporters that governments will not have a choice came as the flow of doses to Africa's 54 countries grows. But vaccine hesitancy and the short shelf life of some donations create new pressures to get doses into arms. Africa remains the world's least vaccinated region against COVID-19, with less than 8% of its population fully jabbed. An independent group of British lawyers, academics, and business people has concluded China's alleged rights abuses against the Uyghur people constitute as genocide and crimes against humanity. The Uyghur Tribunal doesn't have any government backing or powers to sanction or punish China, but organizers hope their evidence will compel international action to tackle alleged abuses against the largely Muslim ethnic group. A Chinese foreign ministry spokesman says, quote, the so-called forced labor and genocide in Xinjiang are entirely vicious rumors. A new report says that technology used to combat COVID-19 may threaten to make surveillance monitoring more widely accepted. The study was by nonprofit research group Algorithm Watch. The group said on Thursday that the health surveillance technologies many countries deployed were often adopted without enough transparency, safeguards, or democratic debate. While acknowledging the technology played a role in saving some lives, it says it is worried about how the pandemic has been used to entrench and normalize surveillance in an increasing number of daily activities. U.S. President Joe Biden says this is a moment when a profound diminishment of freedoms is trending around the globe. At the opening of the first White House Summit for Democracy, Mr. Biden sounded the alarm about a global slide for democratic institutions. He is calling on fellow world leaders to redouble their efforts to bolster democracies. A Global Rights Index report released yesterday found 13 countries saw their civic freedoms downgraded this year from 2020. And the Hong Kong crackdown continues with the conviction of tycoon and prominent pro-democracy activist Jimmy Lai and two others. They had been charged for their roles in last year's banned Tiananmen Candlelight Vigil, which is part of Beijing's tightening political control on Hong Kong. Thursday's convictions were for either taking part in or inciting others to join the vigil in 2020. This was during which thousands of people gathered to hold the vigil despite police warnings. Burkina Faso's prime minister has been fired amid escalating jihadi violence that's killed thousands and displaced more than 1 million people. President Roch Marc Christian Kabore sacked his prime minister amid weeks of anti-government protests. In these demonstrations, people have criticized the government's inability to stem extremist attacks by al-Qaeda and the Islamic State across the West African nation. Russia's military has warned the Ukrainian government against trying to settle a separatist conflict in eastern Ukraine with force. General Valery Gerasimov, chief of the Russian General Staff, called media reports about Russia allegedly preparing an attack on Ukraine a lie. He said Thursday that Ukraine is to blame for escalating tensions in its war-torn eastern industrial heartland by deploying new weapons there. The general's statement adds to the recent tensions sparked by a Russian troop buildup near the Ukrainian border. New Zealand plans to pass a law next year that includes a lifetime ban on smoking for anyone 14 or younger. The law sets a goal of having fewer than 5% of New Zealanders smoking by 2025. This by raising the minimum age to buy cigarettes year after year. In theory, 65 years after the law takes effect, a person could still buy cigarettes, but only if they could prove that they were at least 80 years old. All right, I'm Nima Rajan, and that'll do it for your look at national and international news for today. Remember, for more news on demand, you can always visit our website, thenewsforum.ca, or follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. Take care, Canada. We'll see you again on Forum Daily News.